Thank you, Tom. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm delighted to be here. It's a real privilege and pleasure to be here today. I'm going to see if I get the clicker right. No? Yay! So I'm just going to do a couple of minutes on Picasso, and do feel free to message me or to reach out or to sign up. Ultimately, I'd like you all to become members of Picasso. It is free, and there are many, many benefits. So what is Picasso all about? So you can see here that it stands for privacy, infosec, compliance, culture, awareness, strategy, and ops. That's all encompassing. In other words, it deals with pretty much anything to do with data. And data is at the heart of what we talk about and what we'd like to do. And really, what we're trying to achieve are three major goals. The first is innovation and thought leadership. So we set up labs, and we use those labs to bring together different parts of different organisations. So it's very collaborative. And the outcome is then released, and it's freely available to our members. The other is around elevating our community. So if you think about, and I was explaining this to Steve, I don't know, yeah, still. Earlier I was saying, when I was explaining to my now big kids, but my little children, they go, Dad, I've got no idea what you do. I just don't understand what you do. By the way, my day job is data protection. So when I tried to explain to them in the past, they would look at me puzzled and go, oh, how boring. I go, no, it's fascinating, and honestly, it's going to affect your lives in the future. So what we want to do with Picasso is elevate and recognise some of the multi-talented. So we have an award ceremony in November each year. It's held in London, in Mayfair, in the Grosvenor, and we have 25 categories. So you can nominate yourself or your team or your product or your services, and we come together to, just to celebrate, really. And then the third area, which is an area dear to my heart, is around inspiring the next generation. So this was the conversation Steve and I had. When I was telling my son what university he should go and study, I was going, go data science. It's really interesting. And Steve was trying to do the same with his kids. And no, I'm going to do history. Anyway, so it is unfortunately one of those things that we try to do and sway our kids into the future. So the next generation, Picasso is working with a couple of universities in London, and we're trying to develop pathways, because not everybody is going to go to university, and we want to make sure that it's accessible. So getting into data, how do you get into data? And I'd be curious to know, but we're out of time, just how many people fell into the roles they're in, right? Because I remember years ago, my data center managers coming up to me and saying, Steve, you have a look at this thing called data security. And I was going, what are you talking about? We've got a guard on the door. That was 30 years ago. So without further ado, we'll just invite you to become part of the community. It's a strong community. We have now over 8,000 members. We do events like this. Well, actually not as superb as this, but we certainly have some fantastic events throughout the year. We make it free and accessible and inclusive. So we try to bring people together like you've successfully done here today with Amy and Iron Mountain. And Picasso is proud to be part of it. And there's a couple of guests I can see in the audience that have come. So without further ado, thank you for listening. If you want to follow the QR code, you can sign up or just have a look afterwards. So, big breath. I have the pleasure of the panel. Now, I don't know if you noticed, but I was sat down there at the front. I had so many questions, but I thought, I've got to keep my powder dry, Steve. Just stay quiet. And I have so many questions. So I'm really excited about having this dubious honour. Let me just tell you a few kind of snippets of things. It's been scribbling like mad, and then I'm going to introduce you to our panel, and I'm going to get them to just quickly, if they haven't already, everybody has introduced themselves, so this will be a very quick intro. I I made notes because when I go back to the office tomorrow, the GC that I report to will say, "Oh, Steve, that was a nice jolly you had yesterday. Well, tell me all about it then, and I'll have to type up something later tonight." So one thing that for sure is data governance, and I know Julia spoke about this particular point, is not just an enabler of AI, it's the safeguards and the guardrails. And I think the other conclusion was AI success starts with strong foundations, clean, trusted, well-classified data. And that resonates with me because, 25 years ago, when cybersecurity wasn't even called cybersecurity, and I was talking to people trying to get them to change their passwords and things like that, they just looked at me like, well, what's the problem, Why are you being so pedantic, Steve? Cultural and organisation alignment are as critical as the technical capability. I really loved that point, that came through earlier. And governance, I thought this was really good, I can't remember who said it, but governance doesn't have to kill innovation, and it shouldn't kill innovation, it should inspire. And what I love about this and what I love about Picasso is leaders across privacy, engineering, compliance and product have to work together. And that's very at the forefront of today's day. So, without further ado, the first question was, I'm going to ask Shanice and Julia to have a go at this. So, we've heard so much today, and it's been very good, but what does responsible AI governance actually look like in practice? So, who wants to go first?
I can go ahead.
Okay.
I'll talk a little bit from experience. I think all of that starts with people, so making sure that we have the right people around the table representing different perspectives, different disciplines within the organization, from IT, security, legal, compliance, solution, and so on. So bringing the right people to have the conversation and then start working on the structure. One practical thing which I found very useful was to build some kind of a repository which helps organization understand what AI they are using. So, because if you are not informed, if you are not in control, then how you can be responsible about it. So, what is the easy way and how to leverage existing systems that we all have in places to record and to have some basic information about the AI, maybe including, for instance, the risk level, how risky is AI, so all the stakeholders can have access to that. Then another point I would say is about risk management. Again, risk is something that we do all the time within our organization. Adding that layer around AI, I think, would be helpful. So we are conscious about the use of AI, ethical considerations related to that, and take decisions forward. Again, from practice, I think many of AI is not risky enough to bring some senior leaders to decide whether AI should be used or not, but definitely there will be some high-risk AI where this leadership guidance and decision about the business risk that the organization wants to take should be in place. So different building blocks that should be in place. Maybe I'll just finish with the one which is training and awareness, right? This should be at all level of organization, and people have the basic knowledge and more detailed knowledge depending on their role within AI.
Yeah, I guess just to add, totally agree that it needs to have an end-to-end sort of life in an organisation. So to be kind of responsible with the governance going into AI, there needs to be a mindset in the business of kind of governance by design. So that goes through to your business as usual. So what sort of cultures of appreciation are you instilling in your workforce around the importance of data governance? What habits they need to be getting to grips with, bad habits kind of kicking out, When you've got the right human interventions, tech can be really helpful for that, around kind of, data classification and other elements. But then also looking at unique business decisions as well, making sure that you've got that data governance lens. So something I mentioned in my session was around the introduction of new tech platforms into tech stacks. If you're not careful, that can create loads of havoc around data governance that can then block AI projects in the future. So it's about having that lens when you're kind of selecting vendors, of different tech platforms that you're going to integrate into your wider stack. How are they compatible with the way that your data flows through your business at the moment? The formatting and the standardization protocols. Having that governance by design lens is going to mean that you're going to see off a lot of problems down the road. So it's really kind of having that mindset through the business, I think.
Thank you. I wanted to ask this one earlier, but somebody kind of from the audience sort of asked it, but I'm going to ask again because I think Carl and Paul, you touched on this, Carl, in your PwC example. What's the biggest internal blocker that organisations that you're advising, or even PwC themselves, face when becoming AI ready?
It's hard to give you the number one because there are multiple factors. I think probably the biggest one that I see is probably lack of awareness around art of the possible in terms of what AI can actually do for you. I think a lot of the organisations we see aren't using AI at all today. The ones that are very much in the Copilot in Teams, so it's driving the everyday efficiency AI opportunities, which I often call the small AI use cases, so helping with meeting minutes, helping you summarise a document. I think that the big AI use cases, which is the stuff that will really disrupt, transform, and allow us to have AI delivered in a more industrialised way, people just aren't quite there in terms of understanding where the art of the possible is around it. The cases where I have seen organisations move towards those big AI use cases are typically smaller, younger, leaner organisations without the baggage of historical legacy data, complex processes that have been around for 100 years, and are either startups who are using those big AI industrialised use cases at scale to transform their business models and their business operations, or the ones actually who are needing to take a risk to transform their business to stay relevant, otherwise they know, it will end. So I think, Tom made a good point earlier, which he's known for coining a good phrase. I think hitting the bravery button, I think is needed, not just around the data discovery piece, but also around the ambition and the understanding around actually how AI can do things for us around the big AI and the industrialised AI scale to transform businesses.
Thank you. Paul?
Education and understanding what this new technology really is. So it's building on Carl's point really, but it feels a little bit like the field of AI, which is really broad, has been totally hijacked by one new technology, Gen AI. And the whole thing's got conflated, right? And everyone's got really super excited. But the reality is your organisations have been using AI probably for quite some time. AI in itself is as old as the hills, right? Machine learning is. But we seem to have got lost in the hype, right? And you've got all these pressures, from the board down and, use AI. Let's get going. Let's do something with AI. You've probably been doing stuff with AI, right? What you really mean is generative AI. It's really what it means right here, right now. And I think what we've got to do is make a real effort to get everyone in the organisation to understand at the right level what this new thing is, what it can do and what it can't do. Right? And we've got to try really hard, and this is really difficult, but to move people away from just looking at this hype cycle. Right? It's a bit like buying a new car or new technology, right? You're just going to stand there looking at this thing, right? Because it's constantly moving. But so much of this hype now is it's just a runaway train. Right? these things you're looking at are token prediction engines. They're a fantastic thing, but they're not sentient. They're none of these things. They're just a very, very powerful tool that we now have in our kit bag. So we've got as technologists, but everyone has got to take the time to understand it at the right level and then start to get educated. And then it's going to pave the way to start to do things like exploration and experimentation projects, right? That are meaningful, that have real business value, not vanity AI type things or generative AI things, but start to then use those as vehicles to educate, and you'll start to see how it really, really works. It's a new tech, right? The only way to learn about it is to experiment and to use with it. It's just the only way to kind of move forward with it. So I think that's probably the biggest blockers. And I touched on it earlier, people like those protectors of the realm. Yeah, it's getting everyone around the table comfortable, and you can only do that if you can explain it to everyone that's a stakeholder in that decision-making process. So I think, in my personal opinion, I think that's probably the biggest blocker. It's not a technology thing, it's an understanding thing.
Yeah. No.
If I could add, because blocker made me think about what could be biggest helper, and I think that where we can go further is to have more support from the senior leadership, to have AI strategy or AI, whatever company wants to do about AI, that is really ingrained in the business strategy, because it's no longer just technology that we have got used to, but it's a new thing that we need to have a new approach, maybe new resources, new way of thinking. So I think if it comes more from the top, the people lower are more empowered to act.
Yeah, I agree with that actually, because this has been a very bottom-up change. Right? People come into work with ChatGPT. Usually we drive technology down, don't we? And what's actually happened here is we've almost lost a bit of control at the top. Right? We've lost that control. We usually have good control with new IT. We don't have that. That creates risks for businesses, right? People pocket IT, AI rather, having these devices accessible, using them, building your own little data science, all sorts of things. So, but the only way, I guess, it's a challenge, right? It's getting then everyone that's senior educated as well to help drive that. So it needs a coordinated kind of approach to drive that education and awareness. I go back to that hype thing. We've got to get that hype out of it, because we're not gonna make meaningful progress forward until we get unless we really just understand what this kind of thing is. I think.
No, thank you. So this question for Dave, and sorry. No, Steve. It's me. Sorry.
I just wanted to ask a question. I asked Paul before this, can I ask him a question? And it depends how hard it is. But I guess it was to the panel. Paul, just listening to that answer that you gave, it made me think of mobile. You could have almost swapped mobile for AI, because I remember then it was a bottom-up thing. People wanted to bring their mobile phones into work, and we weren't ready for that. I just wondered, is there anything that we could learn from what happened with that journey with AI?
Yeah, it's exactly the same thing, right? Bringing your device in, downloading apps, all of a sudden you're checking your email, right? And then all of a sudden what you're doing is you're starting to send emails from your corporate account to your Hotmail, so you can get it on your phone, right? So, and that's because you work around it, right? That's what happened. That's what happened. So
I remember you and I had a meeting, this is 14 years ago now. The CIO at the time only wanted to buy 100 mobile phones because he didn't think people needed them.
Yeah. I think that's that, but that's the one thing to learn, maybe take from it, right? Get in front of it. Get in front of it. As leadership, really, get in front of it, because this is happening. This AI thing is happening, and it's going to go up and down. It's going to be probably some bubble bursts along the way, but what will come out of it is a technology that changes the way we think about, IT and the systems that we use. That train has left the station. So.
I think with the mobile phone analogy linkage as well, there's probably something to learn from that around. It's not just about layering on top, so it's not just about having phones. And I think if you stick with the phone piece, actually there was a point where we then started to remove things we had previously, like your desk phones, your faxes. So I think with the AI piece, there's probably a point, and I don't think we're there yet, but it's what are the things we can start to remove from our legacy ways of operating, dare I say it, kind of team structures or like parts of teams or ways of delivering things which AI enables. So I think more of that probably needed.
Yeah, definitely more communication and more tone from the top. Yeah, I like that. So, sorry Dave, this one was on my mind earlier actually, and I think it's really pertinent. Should you allow me that? What role should AI itself play in cleaning and managing the enterprise data?
A big one.
Next question.
Okay, so I think we've talked about a few things already today, things like classification. I'll give you some examples at JLR, like in order to classify data, you need to know what to classify it with. So if I take something like test data of cars, we're starting to use AI techniques around anomaly detection in order to work out what the class is that you want to tag. And it's that's then improving the data. So I mean, we do have scenarios where, I think I touched on this earlier, where we've got those test rigs that cost us thousands and thousands, where we know that there is gold in that data, but because it isn't classified, we can't get to it. And the AI automation around that could be really beneficial in unlocking that value. We've got similar things actually around risk and regulation. Automotive is probably like many industries, I just don't know the other industries as well. But in automotive, we feel like there is a new major regulation hitting us probably every month, somewhere around the globe. And just interpreting the regulation and transforming that into a requirement is something that AI can help with, rather than relying on human interpretation. And all that then feeds, I'm referring to the requirements that we have as unstructured data at JLR, so we can improve our requirements through AI interpretation of regulations.
Okay, when you crack that one, can you let me know? That would be wonderful. Okay, so I've got this question which I thought was really good for our PwC colleague here. So how can organisations strike the right balance between innovation and control? And I used to work at PwC, just to confess. So you know, the world of controls and risk was, you know, what we used to audit.
Yeah.
So how do you balance that? Because that's a real tricky one, because you've got quite stringent requirements.
You have, and I think a big kind of focus of it, the reality is there will be varying scales around risk appetite in different sectors and in different parts of your business and your organisation. So with things like financial reporting, heavily regulated, heavily audited, you know, the appetite to take risk there and to leverage AI may be less than it may be in an area where that isn't the case. So I think it varies. There was a question before around kind of AI governance as well, and I think where I've seen AI governance done really well is where you do have those processes, you do have those procedures, you do have those policies that are put in place to manage AI governance. But actually the committees that come together with representation from across the organisation are almost problem solvers, not policemen. And I think that's a key way to help drive the innovation, because if you've got people in those roles who have a very much computer says no mentality to new use cases or trying to drive particular innovation in areas, actually that will be the blocker, because there will be senior people who have ultimate decision-making sway over whether we bring in new technologies, whether we leverage data, etc. So I think that AI governance and the people around that are critical to making sure that you do balance the control, but you do drive the innovation by looking at solutions that allow you to do things within those guardrails.
Yeah.
And if I could add to that, and that I think needs to be presented from a perspective that it's not another layer of compliance burden, which I hear quite a lot in my practice on the privacy side. So how to really ingrain it into the business and not say, not open the door for an argument. Oh, maybe we should not be doing that because it's another layer of bureaucracy or regulation. Why we should do it if this is so much about the innovation?
Yeah, 100%. And it's a key part of the AI governance, but building your AI solutions so they are explainable and building them from the bottom up with that in mind, again, is key to maintaining the control, so you don't have that black box solution that is uncontrolled. So if I think about some of the AI use cases that we've been building over the last 6 months, effectively, yes, you will have model verification that happens, but rather than having just an input at the end of the AI model, you will effectively get audit points throughout that are produced to allow you to trace back and understand the logic, the rationale, the data that's being used to build that. So I think that's a key way of maintaining the control.
That's a really cool point, actually. That baking in that explainability, those checkpoints, is so fundamental. It gives you that audit and the fact that you can then go back and look. And it helps build trust.
So I'm just going to pick up on that because one of the audience questions was around, or it was a bit more of a statement, but it was around the regulatory regime that we've got in place. So in the EU, we've got the EU AI Act. We don't have that in the UK because obviously Brexit. And the Commissioner has said, the Information Commissioner has said, look, we've got existing GDPR UK regulation that we can use to enforce. But what's the panel's thoughts on AI Act, the EU AI Act, and is that a good thing, or do we need to find our way bottom-up sort of approach that we've discussed? What's the thoughts across there? Do we need some kind of regulation? Because I hear both sides. We need strong, clear guidelines where we can bash people.
I could jump in on this one. So JLR is adopting the EU AI Act because we sell in Europe.
Right.
So that doesn't give us a choice, really. However, what we're finding, and I'll say this a little bit flippantly, is we want someone to get it wrong before us. Because, I'll try and explain that. Law's based on precedent, isn't it?
Yeah.
And at the moment, if you read the wording, and I've tried to do this myself, and even that's a tough job, it's essentially saying anything beyond an if statement is considered AI. And then it says you have to be able to produce a catalogue of all of the AI systems and projects that you've got running in your business. So you're essentially now listing every single Excel spreadsheet that's got more than a simple if statement. And nobody knows yet, because nobody's been fined against it, what reasonable looks like in compliance terms with the EU AI Act. So we're
Wait and see.
wait and see.
Yeah. You just don't want to be first, right?
Exactly. But we're having to go belt and braces.
Yeah.
And we're talking about probably more controls because of it than are necessary because of the risk appetite.
Yeah. Here's the problem, right? It's a new tech that's come along. AI's been around for ages, so actually you're now retrofitting that onto all these things that are actually perfectly fine up to that point. Right? Again, it's back to this whole Gen AI thing has been it's just taken over. It's been around for ages. So yeah.
So I'm happy to add on that. So on AI systems, I agree that it's a very broad definition and it can catch a lot. But we are at the very beginning. Through interpretations, I think they will narrow it down, which will help organizations not to, record everything, but only these solutions with real AI systems. I'm based in Europe, so maybe I have a little bit different perspective. Yes, Europe did harm itself by over-regulating, and now we are paying price for that. But many people look at EU AI Act as a safety product regulation, having at the core really the protection of individuals, human rights, which are at the core of the European Union. They started big, very comprehensive, but I think they are listening, and now they will be trying to help the business operationalize it. So they already announced some help, some guidance, some even office to provide guidance to companies. So I think they understand the issue, that it's too big, but it's a little bit like with GDPR, and Steve, you may remember how we were preparing for GDPR. It was big, it was all about the fines and enforcement, but before the enforcement started, it was at least 5 years, and it kind of settled. But the business is also taking a risk-based approach. It's not that companies are following GDPR to the letter, right? So I think the practice will change it over time. So what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, we work with a lot of global companies, and I think the EU AI Act is being held up as a good framework. And I know a lot of other countries are following variations on it. I think Canada is adopting kind of almost a mirror version of it. Personally, I think the stance we've got in the UK kind of right now works for what we're doing. I think it's pro-innovation, and I think the existing kind of regulations we have within sectors and other areas do catch a lot of the AI risks that things like the EU AI Act are trying to mitigate against. But again, it's never going to be a perfect answer. So I think it's what we have right now. I think works for what we have in the UK, what we need in the UK. And I'm probably looking at kind of what the EU's put in. It does feel a little bit over-engineered and over-regulated. And I know in other areas like CSRD and ESG, there's a big focus on how some of that regulation can be stripped back. So I don't know if similar might be adopted around AI.
Yeah, so it's more a self-regulatory framework which sits better in the culture.
Correct, yeah.
Comparing to culture in Europe where it's more about the enforcement.
Yeah.
So thank you. That was a slight digression, but a good one. So I just want to turn our attention back to the FT Longitude report, which I read and I'm using to bash my leadership at the financial services organisation I work for. So Shanice, what stood out for you? I mean, I have to big shout out here to Paul's Protectors of the Realm. I nearly did a because I felt, yeah, I'm a protector of the realm. It felt really good. But what would you say, objectively, in your research? What's your kind of conclusion, and just based on what you've been hearing today? Any thoughts on that, Shanice?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm glad that the report's been helpful for hopefully getting some progress and making good conversations. I think one of the really interesting things that fascinated me specifically about the UK organisations was how they're pretty proficient at getting value out of their unstructured data. Not an easy thing to do, but can be done. And at the core of that, when we sort of looked into what was going into that, it was a real dedication to get to the bottom of bad data habits that were rife within their workforces. And I guess kind of that was a real distinct route that they're taking with their unstructured data in comparison to the global consensus. And I guess in doing that, you kind of need to know what those bad data habits are. So that could be through kind of observational anecdotes from your management or the people on the front line, maybe kind of surveys, or it could be kind of looking more at sort of gamification or simulations to kind of see if you can capture things in a more kind of real life, simulation environment, and then looking at how you can then help your employees overcome those data habits. So maybe that's through training, through going through any points of misinformation that are kind of skewing how they're handling your data, all the way through to looking at how tech can help you with, breaking those bad habits with employees. So yeah, I thought it was really encouraging that there's a real dedication towards getting AI literacy and data literacy in employees to a higher level. And when we looked at kind of the challenges that people are most fearful of about their AI readiness journeys, UK organisations definitely displayed the most confidence about how AI ready their workforce kind of acumen was going to be in the next kind of 3 years or so. So I thought that was quite interesting and heartening to see, and I think it's kind of good encouragement to keep going on that front.
Yeah, thank you. Nick, we can get that report? Is that being made available? Okay. Very good report. So, worth downloading. So I think this is kind of, to to all of us, to the panel here. And by the way, ladies and gents, please, if you've got some questions that you've been building up, then now's the time to ask. But where, for organisations that are just on the beginning of this journey, because I spoke to a gentleman, Oliver, they're right at the, sort of at the beginning of their journey. But taking into what you said, Paul, we've been doing this for ages, so did we just not realise we were doing it? What's the one thing from each of you wish you had known, say, 2 years ago or sooner, and nothing to do with cryptocurrency or certain presidents getting into an election or...
I can jump in first with a few examples. I am going to focus on Gen AI, if that's all right, as opposed to broad AI topic, on the basis that that's the new bit.
Yeah. So imagine, I don't know if there's anyone just starting out on that journey. Certainly for where I'm working in this financial, it's been going for about a year, but we haven't seemed to have got anywhere.
Yeah. So with hindsight, what we had at JLR was a company-wide ban on all Gen AI. Okay. When the meteor hit.
Yeah, it did. Yeah, I remember.
Yeah.
There you go, yeah.
And that stayed in place for about 6 months. And then we've slowly turned the taps on through a workflow of forms that people have to fill in to be able to prove that they're doing something sensible with it. And now we're turning the taps off again. Because what we're finding is that we have flooded the system with submissions. So in hindsight, had we known that it was coming, being able to cope with the demand. I mean, there's a lot of people and process and even tech around just dealing with the demand planning process. It's not just an Office 365 form that people can just fill in. There is a whole bunch of workflow around it and approvals and engaging legal and compliance and privacy and lots of different things. I think we've got 14 steps to approve in 14 divisions of JLR. Had we known sooner, we would have been able to put all of the people, process and tools in place to deal with the demand before it hit, whereas now it's a tsunami.
So this is back to Steve's point about people walking, in with mobile phones saying, well, I want to pick up my email on here, I want to be able to do this, I've got AI. So Paul, what do you think? What's, you've known?
I'm a techie, right? So I've spent most of the last 2 years immersed in this stuff. So it sounds extremely arrogant, but I don't mean it in that way. But from a technical perspective, kind of like we spent a lot of time, aiimi, really getting under the covers. So kind of really working out how this tech works. So that's why we've been looking at this hype thing going, oh my God, it doesn't do a lot of those things. But I guess it's a bit of a cop-out, right? But it's back to the importance of kind of education. I guess I didn't realise how... I thought the hype would calm down, right, after a few months, and I thought that would give everyone time to get their head around it, and it would all settle down. But we're 2 and a bit years on, and it absolutely has not, has it? Does anyone feel it's got any? No. It's going faster, right? So I just think, and as I say, it feels a bit of a cop-out citing education and that, but I think getting in front of the board in particular, bringing the board back there, if I can say that, back down to a better understanding, right? So that. And then also spending perhaps a bit more time at the coalface. We're a tech company, so we kind of did this. I'm almost putting myself in the shoes of an organisation, right? But, educating also people at the coalface around how this stuff really works. I guess I'm on a bit of a crusade at the moment. I stole this term, it's the truth signal, right? I stole this, I posted something the other day about it. But there's a growing voice for this, right, on places like TikTok, LinkedIn and whatnot. But I guess that's the thing I wish we'd have been a bit more vocal about how this stuff and what it really is. Yeah. Even I won't lie, even I got swept up in a little bit of the hype. I'm a bit of a parrot, right? I get excited sometimes. Steve would say that. Yeah.
I loved your applying for your AI license. Then do your training, your driving test, before you were allowed let loose. But did that create a tsunami? And what would you have done differently?
So it did. I think probably the big thing we would probably do. Well, the one reflection is, I think, with the small AI, as I kind of talked about it before, so the everyday efficiencies, I don't fight it. I think it's something you should put into the hands of your teams and empower them to use it.
It's like Copilot.
Like Copilot, like GPT, Enterprise, those types of everyday efficiency type tools, I think, let them use it, because a lot of them will be using it outside of work. It's better for you to have something within your enterprise that you can manage, you can govern, etc. So I think don't fight that. I think one of the things that we didn't do particularly well, and one of my roles is I'm a Chief Technology Officer for our commercial and government business, and part of that role is actually tech enablement of our teams. We didn't particularly measure the benefits and the impact of what this investment in AI, small AI, was giving us. So actually, what we've done over the last couple of 3 months is start to actually measure and quantify some of the value that it's created, rather than it just be a kind of black hole of licenses and money that we throw in without anything that we can quantify. So trying to measure the value and the efficiencies and the effectiveness that it's helping to deliver, I think has been a key point. And it's not really a measure of impact, but one of the things we have done is try and measure how much these tools are being used. So we've effectively come up with a series of personas for all of our team. So we've got the AI avoiders, so they're the people who don't use any of the tooling at all, so no problems, just not interested. We've got the AI assessors, so the AI assessors are the ones who are dabbling, but it's not part of their core day-to-day. We've got the AI adopters, who are, it's part of their day-to-day, using it most days, if not every day, multiple times. And then we've got what we call our AI ambassadors, who are our top 5%. So nice bit of alliteration there. And like I say, although it's not a measure of impact, it's more of an input-output type metric. What we are trying to do is encourage everyone within our teams to use these tools. A, because it will create the efficiency and the benefits, hopefully, to what they need to do. But B, it allows them to talk with more conviction to their clients, to third parties about the benefits it could deliver to them. So by doing those personas, we've then been able to target training and various other things, mentoring to help drive awareness and usage of the technology.
Yeah, that's really cool. Setting them up into those 4 personas, right, to understand that. I think that's a really, really cool thing to do.
So we've got the ambassadors with the avoiders. And it was interesting, I was presenting to our board and someone said, is it almost like reverse mentoring? And the ironic thing is it's not actually. A lot of the adopters are the people who have been in the organisation for 30 plus years, and some of the avoiders were the grads and the newcomers. So it's quite interesting to see the demographics.
We've seen a similar thing, right?
Yeah.
And it's such a seismic shift. There's an element to you've got to be quite sympathetic as well, right? When you're coaching people along this journey, it's really, really there's so much fear as well as the hype, right? You get all these ludicrous statements about we don't need software developers, this is crackers, right? But how do you take people on that journey? And there's a danger if you don't as an organisation, people are becoming entrenched, right? And they won't actually, because once you start using it, you realise what they've had at. You realise all this hype is nonsense. But the worst thing is if you're really against it and you're refusing to adopt it, then you don't see that and you become further entrenched. So it's incumbent, I think, on organisations sort of ethically, really, and from a responsibility point of view, to work out. And I think that's a great, it's a great way of doing that, right? Bring those people together. And we spend a lot of time at aiimi, doing similar things, making sure people are comfortable. It's cool.
Just maybe to add on, as you speak about people, I think one of the mistakes that we have done, which costed us time simply, was that AI was presented as an IT thing. While I believe that this is really cross-enterprise issue and requires representation from many different disciplines. So I wish we have done it differently from the start. We would be in a different place today.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think, Shanice, you mentioned about employee productivity being 37%. It can help data compliance up to 72%, which was some great stats. Well, in your world as a researcher and a journalist, because there was a lot of people that were concerned about their jobs, journalism is dead, but has it been a tool? Has it been an enabler? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I was just going to add on to what Carl was saying. At the FT, we had a similar onboarding process with Gen AI that we had to apply for our license, so to speak, and to get that, you had to go through certain rounds of training, and that was helpful because it educated us on what Gen AI is and what it isn't. Codes of conduct with, how to make sure that it doesn't come in and skew the journalistic integrity that really is at the heart of everything we do. And it's a great accelerator, but there are, considerations that we have to keep in mind when we're utilising those tools to make sure that the humans in the control seat, that we have to take ownership for the decisions that are being made, whether Gen AI is used in our reporting or not. So yeah, that kind of is at the heart of it. I think humans are going to be needed in the loop for the foreseeable. I think Paul, you were saying that earlier. And to go back to what I've heard from a lot of the senior business leaders about what they wish they knew earlier, in regards to kind of implementing AI, it goes back to something Paul, you were mentioning about that contextualizing. And a lot of people fall into the trap of thinking more data is better. And we need to centralize everything from everywhere all at once immediately in order to do anything with AI, and actually taking that targeted approach, looking at a problem statement and thinking, right, what are the data sources we need for this problem statement? You're not suffering from an opportunity cost of waiting to get absolutely everything, boil the ocean down. You're being really targeted at making sure that you've got the right data sources coming in, that they're reliable, that they're cleansed and tagged in whatever way, so that you can move forward with leveraging AI in a meaningful way. And when you do that well, that can be floated through to kind of areas of risk and compliance. I spoke to an FS company about how they're creating a bot for their risk and compliance teams, and the momentum of the efficiency gains that the bot's been giving the team has been encouraging more of the team to kind of feed into the data sources and verifying that golden source of documents as being the only kind of the really accurate and verified documents that are in that source and the AI model can put on it. And then that's kind of building more gains. So yeah, basically FOMO is a really powerful thing, I think, and that can really build momentum.
Thank you, brilliant. So I've got one last question for our panel today, but I would love to hear if there are any burning questions from our audience. Has anybody got something they want to get off their chest or have been dying to ask? I think, Tom, you said no stupid questions, right? Which is absolutely. Now's good. Madam.
How do you simplify the ROI argument on this stuff without doing massive time and motion studies just to hand out licenses to tools that should be a no-brainer?
So how do we justify the ROI? Top tips.
I'll answer one perspective. A lot of the time, the efficiencies are time savings, and I'm going to say it's the easy one, which is you just work out how much time and then you times it by how much you pay per hour, and that comes up with a figure. It's usually a really low number. The flip side is the opportunity cost lost. So if we take some of the data teams at JLR, there's probably an average of something like £1 million worth of value per head from the insights projects that we run. So then that's a different calculation now, because if you are slowing that team down, they are getting through less projects. We've got way more demand than capacity, so we're not going to run out of projects. So actually it's the opportunity cost lost that is a much higher figure for an ROI. Still based on the amount of time we've saved though, but it's just a higher multiplier.
I just want to build on that really quickly. Right, it's a really important point. There are so many things we don't do as humans, right? Because we don't have the time. Think about that planning. I know it was a Noddy demo, right, earlier, the planning thing. Yeah, you remember the Gen AI planning thing, right? There's an opportunity there to get on the front foot when responding to those incidents. Are you going to sit and read all those things and work out all of your lessons learned and things not to do and the best engineers to send and all the rest of it? No, you're not, right? Because we don't have the time to do that. So it's not really a time zone, but it's going to dramatically improve the outcome, yeah, when responding to those incidents. So there's a big element with this technology, and this I think sits really well. It sits nice in my mind anyway with the ethical angle. We can start to use it to do things that humans were not going to do anyway. Right? And I think that is a really, really good thing, and a really good way of positioning this technology as well. And that's not just to get people to buy in. It's a genuine kind of belief, at least of mine, right? You know, I use Gen AI all day. I have Anthropic, Workbench open. On Fridays sometimes I'm allowed to write a bit of code and whatnot. And I have these tools open, and it's just improving my productivity, right? But it's also getting me to do things I wouldn't have done otherwise. Right? So I think that is a thing, and it makes the business case. You know, it's a different way to position it, but I think it's absolutely opportunity.
Okay, and sir?
With organisational AI built on a RAG database, what are the opportunities for data minimisation when it comes to security, privacy? Obviously, not in every case do you need to provide all of the data. Where should you be applying data minimisation? Should it be at the beginning, somewhere in the process?
I guess that's...
Sorry.
It's a good question. Sorry, it's just been a long day. It is a really good question. You've kind of got two choices. You could take the time up front, because it's going to be based on persona, right? Who's looking at this information? So you've kind of got your super or your high level ways of chopping information down. You've got your classifications, we spoke about it earlier, shrinks the world. And then we've got permission, shrinks the world a little bit more. And then we've got this little bucket of information after. And really what you're saying is then within that information, there's bits where you might want to hide. Right? You've really got two approaches for that. If you've got quite a coarse-grained set of requirements and quite a coarse-grained set of personas, you can define them up front. You could think about creating renditions of that information for the persona. So if you can determine who the persona is, who's using the system, you can then almost select the right subset or rendition of that information past that, right? And that might have bits in there that are redacted, or it might just have those bits, whatever the right thing to do is for that scenario. Obviously, the one that's dead obvious is things like PII information and stuff like that, right? That's probably what everyone's thinking. You can take that approach. If it's more dynamic, then you need to start to think about doing that on the fly. There are technologies that can do that. You've got more deterministic technologies like NER, etc. Good for things like PII, names, organisations, locations. But for things that are more contextual, so you want to blank out certain pieces of text in the overall context of a prompt, then you do veer towards language models. But one of the things to consider with that, of course, is the accuracy, because they're not deterministic, they're not deterministic models. So you might have a verification step there, right? And that's a good example of perhaps where you might use agentic, because you could send that information to a step to be validated that it is the right then subset of data, and then it gets pushed through to give the user the answer. So so there isn't a single answer to that, right? But it all comes down to one of the biggest things to think about with your information, structured and unstructured, is preparing it, and really that's what you're saying, preparing it for the safe use of AI, or generative AI is what we're really talking about.
I was going to say the same.
Thank you. I think we're nearly out of time, so last few minutes. So I'd just like to hear from each of the panel, please. Final question. I'll start it, so I'll finish. What do you see in the next 12 to 24 months? I mean, taking your point, Paul, well, for the rest of us, it feels like it's going at breakneck speed. I know what you're saying is you've been doing this for a while, but what does the panel see the next 12 to 24 months look like? Given everything that's going on. So I'll start. Julia, can I start with you?
Yeah, maybe one thought, which is I think these companies which have a long-term vision and they prepare in advance, set the right things in order, they will be more successful long-term. So it's a little bit like I don't know, sport competition. You don't jump into the pool thinking that you're going to win a race unless you're prepared on many different levels.
Yeah, nice answer. Carl?
We're starting to see quite a lot around AI orchestration, which I'm quite excited around. So the ability to link together different custom GPTs, AI solutions, models, and actually connect things between them rather than do standalone things. And again, I know the technology behind that isn't particularly new or revolutionary, but we're starting to see more of that in an industrialised way. So I actually think some of the value and the benefit we get from AI will be further reaching than we've currently seen in a more cost-effective way. So excited to see what that brings.
Yeah, so Shanice?
One thing that I've seen come up a few times in discussions with business leaders is around the classification and explainability piece, and really empowering employees to be able to make decisions with AI with confidence and in a responsible way. And one area is around kind of classifying the suitability of a certain data source or data point in terms of the decision at hand. So whether it's sort of looking at a traffic light tier system, so for a certain tier of decision, you need to have data sources that qualify, you've got 3 green, no red, and only 1 amber. And it's all just kind of looking into how you can empower your employees to deduce what they're actually seeing from an output, so that, going into that explainability piece, I think people who manage to crack that are going to be able to move a lot quicker than their competitors, I think.
Yeah. No, thank you. Sorry, who else? Dave, and we'll end on.
Tricky one to answer quickly, this one. I'll try and do it. My brain always goes into the people, process, tools type breakdown for this sort of thing. So imagining the future, I think there'll be more specialist roles, certainly more communities, guilds, centres of excellence, that sort of thing for the sharing. There'll be more consistency in training and adoption because of it. I'll stop on people for that, I could go forever. From the process side of things, I hear a lot that it's a lot of teams don't know what they have to do to be compliant or to even be efficient with spinning up a new AI project, for example. And it will be a lot easier in the future where it's just a well-trodden path that people are used to following. In the same way that a traditional IT project has steps that people know and are familiar with today. I'll stop there on process. Tools. There's loads that we could go after. We've all been on the warehousing journey and that sort of thing with data. But I think data fabrics and semantic layers, and then some cool new tools like bias assessments and consequence scanning from an ethical point of view, they'll start to become more commonplace, and it all adds to that confidence that you're doing the right thing.
Very good answer. Finally, Paul.
God. All right, so I think what we're going to realise, say we, Anthropic, OpenAI, everyone that's building these big models, they're going to realise that building bigger models is not necessarily better. When I say bigger, I mean in terms of the vast amount of data that they're trained on and the number of parameters that connect those models. We put in the pursuit of going from, you'd have heard of 70B models, 80, 100 400, 1.5 trillion parameters. And we're going to have to deal with it because we're starting to see that models, big models, are getting worse. So we will not be able to build anything like straight-through agentic processes that are reliable with hallucinations getting worse. And hallucinations are a byproduct of the underlying technology. And if you look, and this is well publicised, if you look at 03 and 04, for example, which are the OpenAI reasoning models, they're far worse than 01. Right? So what I think it's going to do, it's going to mean we're going to have to go back and we're going to have to look at the data we're using to train these models and look at data quality and where that data comes from, right? We have a risk at the moment as well that we're now getting AI slop. introduced into training data sets, right? And that's going to be happening as well if you're using Copilot in your organisation to generate content. We're now creating human content and AI content, right? And if that AI content contains hallucinations, we're exacerbating the problem. So I think as an industry, we're going to need to go back and revisit that. And I think we're going to find ourselves looking at curated data, trusted data. It touches a little bit on some of the points we were talking about earlier, about like the European, looking at creating data sets that are more trusted. I think that's what it's going to drive us towards, to help us get more kind of accurate output. You're never going to eliminate some of these things like hallucinations. They're a fact of life because of the technology. They won't go until another new technology comes along, can dramatically reduce them and manage them. But I think at the moment that's the elephant in the living room. We've not heard of GPT-5 for a while, have we? Right? Sam keeps promising us it, but we've not seen it for a while. Yeah. It's still not coming, and O4, it's not being pushed out into all regions. Right? There's a struggle at the moment to try and get on top of this, and there's a bit we're giving it more data. Why is it not getting better? So I think that's what it's going to become. I'll come in here very technically, as you'd expect, but I think that's what's going to become the thing that we really kind of need to think about. And as users of those models, I would say, and it goes back to that model selection thing I was talking earlier about, it's going to become really important to think about the data you provide those models, classification, all those other ways of making sure that data is the smallest relevant set, but then also thinking about back-to-back testing of those language models. See what gives you the best outcome. Going straight to 4.1 might not necessarily be, maybe using a slightly smaller model. So I think that's what the next 12 months, 18 is going to.
That's fantastic. Will you join me with a big round of applause for our fantastic